And good tomorrow. Alright, so we're just gaming here on this is a gaming PC. Look, I'll just bring up some information. Anyone who cares what we're running and why. It's true that my settings don't affect your machine. For the sake of this video though, it might help. Some things here to take note of is that I've locked my frame rate to 40. That allows me to run with all the settings kind of cranked. And I've dropped the ray tracing quality from ultra to high. The only other thing in those menus that's a bit different to the usual is that the anti-aliasing is set to low. Now I've seen some visual comparisons on the internet which show with the anti-aliasing at low that there are issues in the rendering, which I might have been blaming on a different technology. I thought it was a feature of FSR or something else. I thought, oh no, that doesn't look very good. So look, I'm just going to run around some zones in the game. Probably am using the wrong character. I can't get everywhere on the map. So there's not much point running around with this character. Anyway, I didn't want to do a long lead-in, just to show that the game can work smoothly. It is an amazing game. So I'm just going to pop by the menus and run from there. That way I can load up a game where I can fly around the map. And so some people at home might be inquisitive about the ability to, you know, fly, just to transition in and out of the castle. If we can expect a certain wait time on doors or just whatever, you know. Being able to see somebody else's rig running, who certainly isn't running the latest and flagship stuff. I think this is it's a 10-year-old PC. It's not a poor machine by any standards back then. Things like quad channel RAM can alleviate RAM bandwidth issues. So even though my RAM's only rated at I think just a little bit over 2000 megahertz, quad channel effectively means it sort of works a bit like the 4 gigahertz or the 4800 megahertz rated RAM. So look, it is an old machine. If I play it down, it's like if my old machine can run it, your machine can run it. That's not a given. I do like to buy enthusiast parts. And that's the purpose of today's video, is that yesterday, trying to make this game work, I was having a look at some constant stutters that I was getting. And as a techie, I like to, I don't know, push the difficulties that other people are pushing. I like to see them for myself so I can be empathetic or understand. Oh, apologies there, I think I ran out of the Great Hall in the wrong direction. So yeah, apologies. If I head for the glass house, and then I can exit out the front. Now I'm just going to run down to the bottom. This might be academic for later in the video if anyone wonders about hard to draw areas in the game. Listen to my fans. You'll hear my video card actually now fight. I desperately have to keep on top of its temperature. The fan will actually spin up. And I've set the fan to spin at half speed. Because I've learnt this profile, I know what generates heat and when, and what do I need to do to stay on top of that. And so I've actually been really enjoying this machine for the last day or so. Really totally silent. Okay, so this area here, I use this as a place in my game to learn a lot about my rig. What it does is it's one of the hardest to render areas in the game. And not for any legitimate reason, but there is a bunch of stuff going on in the room. It's a fairly complex bunch of triangles. There's a lot of lighting stuff going on. It's a great spot to find genuinely your worst frame rate. And so that's the only reason to visit this room. And yes, I could tune my video card to run, you know, 10 frames easily faster, maybe even on the lows, but I opt to just run it cool and quiet. The other day I was playing with it, I was pumping 320 watts through it, just jamming it at full pelt, you know, a couple of hundred megahertz more speed than I'm currently running. And certainly allowed me to brute force the game in ways that I hadn't seen previously. Ooh, now I've never seen such a long load on this door here. And that is a little bit about what we're talking about today. It's actually the loading systems that your game uses. So I've moved my game off the drive I had it on. In fact, I've moved it around a lot. And that's sort of how I've academically come to learn a little bit about my rig. And in terms of what makes the game work better or worse. And why I actually do this video today. So sorry if there's a long lead in before we get to anything. Look, clearly I'm playing the game. It's just a case of proof of the pudding, money where your mouth is. If you can't show me a good working game and you're telling me you've got all the tricks under the sun to make it work, then how do you know, right? And that's a little bit of hopefully today's video I'll cover some of the things that don't work on the net that a lot of people are putting forward as solutions, but having tested them myself, that's not the case. There was a little judder as I went over the bridge there. That one there is a traversal stutter, is often in the game. I hadn't experienced that in the last 2 days. I actually kind of come to believe that changing my drives had gotten around that. So my drive is working less performant than usual at this moment, and I can tell that by leaving the doors out of the castle. They're normally instant, and they've gone from being instant to being chunky. Now if I'm having data load issues, we're probably going to have a problem running into Hogsmeade here, where it locks up for about a third of a second and then continues. Okay, so we didn't get that, but I'm now going to run around Hogsmeade, and I know 2 or 3 ways I can maybe generate it, and that's what we're looking for. It's just little judders or stutters. You will notice there's a match-up between the moments I get microstutter, and if you look at the GPU memory utilisation in the bottom left corner, it's currently saying 13 gigabytes or 13,000 megabytes. That one there, you'll actually watch when it changes by a couple of thousand megabytes, are usually the moments when there is microstutter in the game. And that day at the moment is it's the issue that everybody needs to work around. Okay, so what is the issue? Look, I'm of the belief, this is what caused the issue. In the last couple of weeks there's been an executable, that is the game file, has been updated. I believe it was part of some advertising for the new product. When they've replaced that executable to put ads in the new game that's coming out into our games, it looks like they've made this game end of life. That's the cynic in me saying that. Let's just say it a different way. It looks like by accident they've knocked a couple of gig of everybody's VRAM use off of their machines, so now that the game is constantly trying to stream in the assets ahead of you. And I think the assets ahead of you are in like a Y formation, or a bit like Skyrim, which use U-grids, but it wasn't a neat number like a circle that spanned out from the player. It's had slightly more focus on grids in front of the player that would branch out in different directions, just in case the player wanted to run off to the left or right. And my experience of Hogwarts testing is that when I fly a broom beside the ocean, all the streaming issues drop off. So it's clearly trying aggressively to bring in new areas in front of the player. And if you can ease the burden of what those areas are, all the issues can disappear. But as someone that's been trying to exacerbate the issue, right, I put my game on a lowly, a 10-year-old SSD at a budget one at that, and the game actually worked flawlessly for the best part of half a year with no issues. And it's only just recently when this modification's been done to the game, where it uses less VRAM, that I'm having issues. And when I've gone on the net and looked at the number of people having issues and the time frame, really suggests in the last couple of weeks something's happened. My belief is the game is using less VRAM. That's what I can physically see. I see the game using 3 gig on average less than it used to use. And then come with it are all of these on-the-edge systems, possibly a bit like mine, that now are having judders that never used to. Now I understand why I get judders when I use a 10-year-old budget SSD. But yesterday I did a lot of investigation into that, and I actually looked at the task manager, looking at my CPU usage while copying files to and from various drives. And it's not as straightforward as I thought it would be. I've been a techie since a long time ago, and I'm very familiar with drive speeds and certainly buying SSDs, and I'm aware of the different technologies and how, as they came to market, consumers didn't really want to spend good money on SSDs, and so it wasn't until we started selling a lot less chips in them and selling them for really cheap price points that consumers went, yeah, look, I'm going to consider maybe buying that. And the less chips we put in them, the less performant the solid-state drives were. They just, right, solid-state drives, by the time they were mass-market products, were nothing like the first generation of solid-state drives, or even the second generation of solid-state drives. That just, the drive access time was ridiculously quick in ways that later solid-state drives don't have. They have big latencies as they try to decompress the data and figure out what's going on. Anyway, that's become the norm, is that once SSDs came to market, nobody wanted to buy them, so the price points got stratified, budget parts started getting sold, and that's what most people buy. And the reason they do that is that in a benchmark, the budget drive looks like it benchmarks, within a small percentage of what the pro drives can do. So most people go, well, I'll just save half the money, thanks, and buy twice the space. The problem is that the pro drive has a controller chip in it, which alleviates the CPU hit the budget drive needs. Now, the budget drive. All the CPU it needs in order to just to use the drive isn't a problem if you're sitting on the desktop level in Windows doing productivity tasks and your CPU is totally available. But as someone in the last week that has massively overclocked my CPU, about 1400 megahertz per core, with 12 threads, it's a lot of extra CPU grunt on tap that the game never previously needed. And I found that it ameliorated some of the slowdowns a little bit, but it didn't totally get on top of it. So further investigation was needed. And when I've gotten to the nitty-gritty of it, I started looking at how much CPU is required to use some of these drives. What I noticed is up to 8 threads would be taken off my computer to assist with the data decompression that the budget drive needed to have help with. And it was equivalent. When you add it up, okay, that core's only loaded 20%, that core's loaded 30%, that core's only loaded 5%, that one's loaded 10%. But you added it all up, it was effectively another entire CPU core running at like 4.5 or 5 gigahertz of speed needed just for the drive. So if you've got a rig that only kind of meets the bare minimal for these modern open world streaming games, you are in fact CPU limited because of your drive in ways that other people might not be. And that CPU limit you've got will affect all aspects of your streaming systems. It'll affect a lot in the game. Okay, so I'll just run it here because it sometimes slows down as I run around this little pillar here. All right. This is a worst case scenario. Let's just keep it loaded. Anyway, after many hours of drive testing, what I noticed was that the drives with different file sizes perform very differently. Now that's standard. Ever since solid-state drives came to market, the smallest file sizes, be it 4 kilobyte file sizes, are atrocious read speeds on most solid-state drives in the market. What I noticed was that between a Samsung budget drive and an Intel budget drive, middle-sized files, I think it was the game Outward, and I watched it, and it was bogging my CPU down like nearly 2 full cores, right? Like, yeah, it was still using the same 8 threads, essentially. But it really hammered, and it was just entirely dependent on the files it was moving. And it didn't necessarily have to be just small files. And that even between a couple of different, arguably budget drives, their performances were totally different in handling different file sizes. To the point where I think the Intel drive wasn't so bad on the reads, but the writes was fairly heavy on both drives. And I could see with the Samsung drive, I wouldn't mind making it my page file, or like, arguably you're like, oh, but you write lots of data to your page file. It's like, yeah, but when I'm in the game and I'm trying to load from it, that's when I need it to not have the CPU hits necessarily. So, look, anyone at home looking at my frame rates going, oh, this isn't perfect, and why does he play the game like that? I agree, this isn't my final setup for playing the game. I've been playing it the last day or so on these settings. Been really liking it because it's quiet. And that's all that's going on right now. Is I've locked my fan. I'm trying to keep it below 2600 RPM, and we basically don't hear it in gaming. And then I've just been running around playing Hogwarts silently for the last day with all the settings cranked to ultra, and that's been a real joy, be it late at night or whatever. Maybe during cutscenes you get to hear the fan spin up just a little bit, but over the ambience of partner lights a fan on in the room, and as background sound, having my computer in its worst scenario when it heats up sound equal to the fan that's always on. It means that my computer is essentially silent. Not as silent as I like it, but silent in terms of you don't notice it on in the room. That's all that matters. I notice when I play my videos back though, I can hear my hard drive heads seeking, right? So I've got a quiet case. Arguably it's a really good quiet case. My hard drives are obviously inside that quiet case. And the fact that the microphone here is so sensitive, a Rode Australian company, but it's as a mic, and even though it's pointed away from my computer, it hears every little fan spinning, every little noise from my computer. So if you hear my computer spin up at all at moments when I'm doing crazy heavy gaming, it probably sounds worse than it does, really. But anyway, there's a little bit of ego stuff. I guess it doesn't really matter. Some of it's theory and some of it matters. In terms of you think, well, why would I trust this person for tuning my game if clearly the settings they like to run aren't the same as my settings? Well, no, okay, I agree. Everyone has different requirements. My requirement of a gaming PC is to hit 4K at 60 frames a second. And the only reason a gaming PC is required to do that is the consoles, well, they're not going to hit 4K at 60 frames a second. And if they do, I probably, you know, if it's a graphic intensive game you want to look at, it probably won't be that impressive. Whereas the same game then over on PC can be. So case in point is I've played this game mostly on the PlayStation at 30 frames a second in quality mode and loved every moment of it. But now all I want is basically the same experience on my PC, but ideally with much higher visual fidelity, running at a true high resolution. And I do feel I've got that now. But in order to get that, in order to get it sorted out, there's a few things that needed investigation, and I definitely encourage users to learn about your solid-state drives and or your hard drives, which generally don't have any CPU required to use them. They might run at a fifth the speed, or worse, a tenth the speed when loading data than a half-decent SSD. Heck, a really good SSD might be 40 times the speed of a hard drive. But that hard drive with no CPU usage might be a great drive to put your game on, fully well knowing the game doesn't really load, I think, straight into RAM. I haven't checked this yet, but as someone that's been running the game on the worst drive you can possibly buy for a very long time and having no problems, I was of the belief that it's moving all the data via pagefile. So over the last couple of weeks, trying to sort out microstutters, I've actually found that by moving my pagefile and a couple of little tricks related to the pagefile, I've vastly improved my frame rate lows or removed the microstutter issues I was having. So those frame rate lows might have been more so during cutscenes, and if anyone looks at the cutscenes and the asset quality that gets brought in on the models, we can see that there is a lot of data being streamed in and out. And it wasn't an issue a couple of weeks ago when all of our cards held a few more gigabytes of data in memory at any given time. The burdening subsystems weren't constantly overloaded trying to load stuff in. But look, what happened? So yesterday I tried so many solutions at play that other people on the net were talking about, and some of them were good, some of them not so much. And so a lot of the ones regarding deleting your shaders and whatnot, and one of the worst on that was rename a particular folder. It's like Windows, no Windows or something. Look, I don't want to give the name of it specifically, so gamers don't technically go out and try and find it, because one of the solutions was rename that folder to old, and basically force the game to rebuild it from the ground up. The file size difference between a rebuilt folder and the one that you just deleted is not even like 200 kilobytes or something. It was very, very little. But for hours in game, all my reflections were missing. And so the thing that people on the net say is that, oh no, you delete this folder, it's just a glitch. And then your game runs really quick for hours. And yeah, my game ran really quick, but it wasn't running ultra settings anymore. Now, apologies, I've never really seen frame rate running quite this bad in my rig. Yeah, maybe I need to tune up. I haven't been running around these foliage areas as of today. I've just been too busy playing, really enjoying it. Look, that being said, when I turn the overlay off, it can be good for about 10%. I am currently running in... Oh, there we go. I could tell it wasn't running ideal. Yeah, look, I believe this is running in full screen mode. And just like any piece of Windows software since the dawn of whenever, full screen mode is what you need to be doing. And it makes a difference. So, yeah, this game running in full screen mode is probably what you want to do. Yeah, I've lost my frame doubling, so now I'm just running my raw frames. So my video driver's probably crashed a moment ago. It's my fault. I'm undervolting like 100 millivolts on my GPU. That's me, but that's okay. I'll have to look into that. So for 4 hours I played this morning, and I had one crash during a cutscene right after the game went really bad, like it did just a moment ago. So look, I'd say this is an unstable system. So don't take my advice. If I give you an unstable system, that's an epic fail. Right? That's me, the techie, telling you that. You need stability. Because now I can't run at double my frame rate. I'm not going to have the nice V-sync anymore. And flying through these trees on sunset is just a nightmare at the best of times. But it's good so you can see my low frame rates. You can see that I've tweaked the machine around stable lows. Oh no, I think the frame doubling is still in action. So I must remember I've locked my upper frame rate to 40. No, it's just poor frame rates. Sunset on my back, clipping the edges of the forest, which is a guaranteed surefire way to make the frame rate go really low if you can get these trees to fill the screen. I can't create a worst case scenario than what we're creating right now. Anyway, drives. So, look, they all perform a little bit differently. Your page file is often on your system disk. If you've got access to multiple drives, though, you might find that you can increase your input-output by having access to both drives simultaneously, such that you put your page file on your other disk, which might be doing nothing, and that way when your Windows is loading to the page file, both drives can read and write simultaneously without impacting the performance of the other. So definitely look at where your page file's at, make it large, lock it off as a size, make the minimum and the maximum the same. And it's called a swap file. If you need to go and hit an internet web page in order to learn about how to relocate a page file in Windows, by all means do. Look, I know how to do it off the top of my head since the 90s, but with every version of Windows 11 and every version of Win 10, they keep trying to take away all the shortcuts that I would have used to guide you there, and I just don't want to give misinformation. That's always the worst on the net, when someone makes out like something's going to be really easy for you to do. It wouldn't take you 20 minutes to redo your page file. It will require a reboot. That 20 minutes includes time to go on the net and learn about it and follow a very, very slow step-by-step guide to give you the 6 button clicks you need to do in order to do it. Just so with confidence you feel that you're doing it right. You know, if you make yourself a morning drink, like a tea or a coffee, and while you're drinking that, if you were to sit down and do that project, it would be done by the time you finish your drink, and then you might have improved frame rate in your game. If your page file's been holding you back, if you're getting drops during cutscene sequences, could be the case. Really, if you're going to come on the forums though, bring some information, right? So if you know your machine's getting hot, let people know that. If you know your machine gets janky right before it drops back to Windows, let people know that. If you say, yeah, it works really smooth, and then in the cutscenes you can tell it's really stammering, it's dropping down to 6 frames a second, and then it goes back to Windows, right? That information's really handy for whoever's going to try and help you with the issue. So just share any information you got, right? It's going to be relevant, it's going to be helpful to the next person. It might save them a lot of time, might save a lot of back and forward getting questions. You might get more answers from more people because they feel they don't have to prompt you for a little bit more data in order to get the bare minimal to be able to offer you some advice. If you provide lots of information up front, they can sift through it. They're probably going to be looking for a certain set of variables that's led to issues for them, and if they can see that you've made the same errors, they'll probably come in with some really relevant info saying, oh yeah, my RGB keyboard does the same. I get the freeze effects on all the spells, and you need to go into the I get file for the game, and you can turn off the RGB lighting affecting your spell effects, or your RGB peripherals from responding to in-game action, and that would no doubt fix the issue. But I've seen a few people with jank every time they cast a spell, and it's their RGB lighting and stuff, right? But if you're on the net, and people know that you've got RGB peripherals, it might be a solution that they're looking for you. So yeah, just furnish some information. Look, I do really feel that since the in-game VRAM usage of the game has dropped, everybody needs to get on top of their streaming systems. So either the game itself, you might need to put it on a better drive. I would say not a budget SSD drive. Maybe your system disk, if it's the one good one in your machine. If you've got a laptop that was built to a cheap price point, some of the cheapest solid-state drives in my life I've ever seen, outside of Xbox consoles, because none of them have intelligent controller chips on them. That's how Microsoft makes their money selling them. The dumbest SSD drives you could possibly sell, i.e. more budget than the Samsung budget drive. Some drives are super budget. If your laptop was a little bit budget than other models on the market, it might have, the manufacturer, in order to be price competitive, might have put a cheaper drive in your machine. It's true when I've been working on, as an IT tech, when I work on some people's budget laptops, even ones I've recommended for them, sometimes when installing the Office suite, I find out just how bad the write performance is on any given modern SSD. It's not so bad if the write performance is slow, because generally you write data once in terms of software, like productivity software, but then you're reading it for forever, and as long as the read speed is quick, that's what most people are buying an SSD drive for. So just check your productivity. Look, you might want to run some benchmarking on it. I basically use Passmark. I just really enjoy that. But every technician uses a different suite of tools. I like Hardware Monitor, Hardware Info Pro, I think it is, Hardware Monitor Pro, and that's fantastic for, being able to see your temps, being able to see, what was the minimum and maximum the entire time I was running my game, what actually happened to various bits of equipment. And so that inspection, this information can really help techies like myself trying to get on top of
Would be nice
the
to
issue. Oh, there we go. So that was a lot of data coming in and out. I don't usually get that jank. Anyway, this is the jank we're looking at right now. This is it, perfect. So if you look at my memory usage in the bottom corner there, saying 12 gig, you'll see that that was probably just being jammed really heavy right then. And because of the update speed looks to be, what is it, once every second and a half? Once every second. If that update speed was set to twice a second, we might have seen the memory, GPU memory pop up to 14 and then drop down to 11 and then rebuild back to 12. But because of the update speed, that might have all happened in frames that weren't being rendered to the screen. And so we see it at 12, and then it goes up to 15, goes down to 11, comes back up to 12 or 13, and then it looks like it's at those numbers again. It looks like nothing has been happening. So if you need to change the polling interval or the interval which you get your sensors are measuring at in order to get valid and useful information, don't be afraid to change those intervals from once every 2 seconds a little bit more frequently while you're trying to get the information as to what's actually happening with your rig. Look, the most important one I say for anyone to get on top of this, especially if you're an AMD card user, if you go into your drivers and the metrics there and you turn on a sensor called GPU hotspot. Ooh, I am having a bad run today. Right, so this is the data streaming issues, and this is the issues that have come about in the last couple of weeks for lots of people. And right now, with the game on really fast drives, I'm still having these issues. So for me at this point, I'm going to say it's probably internal bandwidth on my card I need to look at. Change around my overclocks a bit. I just saw the GPU memory shoot up to 14.5 and then clear right down to 11 again. Right, I used to have the joy running around Hogsmeade. It would sit on 15.5 gig RAM used and I would have none of this stutter. So at the moment, I'm of the belief it's an end-of-life product that developers want to move people forward to the next Quidditch program. And the best way to do that is to make this program, which everybody spends lots of hours in weekly. Well, not everybody, but some gamers. If you're watching this video, maybe you. And the best way to move us forward is to make this game useless. And we see that, right? We've seen Bethesda, in order to get people on Fallout, have to deprecate the last Skyrim, or whatever, like Starfield comes out, Skyrim gets a patch, makes it unworkable basically on consoles, and so, Bethesda know that some of those people might go out and buy a copy of the new game, right? So the companies do this sort of stuff. We know these tactics are in play in the market. I don't think Warner have any respect for end users, more than, say, small independents. The companies I like to support are generally never the big ones, the big AAAs, and we certainly saw with this software a real lack of love for the end users. Right? The PC version was basically abandoned the day they put the code out. It looked like they then worked on the Nintendo Switch version. People like myself waited a year to get the patches, the first 3 or 5 patches for the game, and just continually pulled down the settings on PC and made it run worse, and introduced lots of glitches that weren't in the game on day one. So of course I was expecting after they finished the Switch version that we might get that final PC patch needed to restore all the things that have been broken and hurt since release. And then they put out 2 more patches, and it couldn't be further from the truth in terms of what actually happened. Look, these are hard to render thing. Put your light spell up like complex natural environments. All right, so what needs to be done? Okay, so if your hotspot is getting hot, if you're an AMD user, your hotspot is getting up over 100, that's fine. That's part of the design. The hotspot isn't a specific location, it's the worst measured point across a range of sensors on your graphics chip. You can argue that the hotspot is like the middle of the core and that the other GPU temp is more measured from the edge of the chip. I like to think of things that way, and that's why I see a 3-degree variance between the 2 points normally, under normal gaming, normal load, normal everything. I do find with titles that hit my compute pretty hard, certainly benchmarks have allowed me to isolate what's causing the heat. It is those compute units, or the things that are used for ray tracing. And I do find in any title that hits me for ray tracing that quite often on the menu the game will just crash back to Windows. And when I've gone to investigate it, it is the GPU hotspot. It's peaking up over 115 and it's either rebooting my machine, or it's picking up above 110 and then dropping back to Windows and crashing out the drivers. And all I needed to do across The Witcher with ray tracing, Portal RTX with ray tracing, Quake with ray tracing, Descent with ray tracing, basically every ray tracing title I could throw it at it. Ghostwire Tokyo, you name it, anything with ray tracing, I had to either put a frame cap in the menu so it wasn't growing ridiculous frames per second, or I had to limit my clock speed. And so ultimately I was doing it with The Witcher because it was a title I wanted to play, and I finally found that by dropping my clock speeds down, my card didn't overheat. I could finally get past the menu, I could set my frame cap or do whatever. And then once I had that sorted, I could progressively raise my clock speeds back to where they belonged. It might be more specific to my card. It is a factory overclock card. The card does enjoy using up to 200 millivolt less power than the factory standard, and so default drivers want to run my card at 1200 millivolt, which is, I don't need to run 1200 millivolt on anything. Right? The other day, two days ago, I sat here trying to put as much power into my card as it would humanly take and being able to run a game. And the only way I could do it was to basically run the RAM at ridiculously fast speeds, because the RAM would get hot in a way that wasn't getting the middle of the chip die hot. And so by doing that and running some mild overclocks, I was able to soak 320 watts of power through the card, and yeah, I could get some impressive frame rates. And even after a while, I found some settings where I could keep my GPU hotspot right down, and it was a perfect marriage of fast card. But it did require me to raise my fan profile such that it can handle peaks. Basically, any time a cutscene happened in game, and the card wanted to use itself fully, it would, and I would watch the temperature go up, and I didn't like my fans going up in cutscenes. So my current build is the fun gaming with the partner for hours, in a quiet room, and I don't mind a couple of low frame rate moments. I don't notice when all I've got to do is beat the console version, which is 30 frames a second in terms of ray tracing with quality, and I tune for 30 frame lows, and then I use a frame doubling technology to, as long as I can keep 30 frames as the minimum in FSR aware games using fluid motion frames 2, the game is really quite fluid, and I don't notice frame composition errors, and it feels like 60. And the best thing is that all the frame issues that come with doing ray tracing at low frame rate, if it draws a white patch on the screen, it's now persistent-wise on the screen, it's there for half as long, right? So if anyone says, the fluid motion frames gives you errors in the frame draw, it's like, look, over the course of an hour of playing, if I'm looking for them, I might see less than a handful of moments at a single frame, times 60 a second. There's not that many moments where it glitches on me. And then for every second I'm playing, the doubled frame rate, the amount of glitches it reduces for me is very noticeable. So, apologies here. The Switch wireless controls have a 30 millisecond lag, should be in USB mode. That latency means that I'm done hitting. I let go of one button before the other one registers in Windows. It is a Windows thing. It's not frame doubling, where certainly fluid motion frame 1, I found certainly mouse movement. You might get like stepped mouse movement if you move your mouse diagonally across the screen. You could see that when the computer was drawing the alternative frames, that input tracking was compromised. And I haven't found that with fluid motion frames 2. Only in one game that didn't have any FSR technologies in it. And it clearly didn't have the ability to be handed the vector plotting that fluid motion frames uses, that figures out intelligently where things are going to be in the next frame and then draws them appropriately. Just going to try and hit this worst case scenario moment here. We should get that glitch as the data streams in and out. Now we seem to be pretty good. So look, long video. Sort out your drives, definitely. If you are getting drops back to Windows during cutscenes, maybe bring up your metrics for your video card, get your hotspot up on the screen, and look, either leave me a comment or something. I'd be more than happy to address what I think are your next steps for sorting out an issue based on information you might be able to provide. So please do. But let's try and keep it relevant to possibly open world games, and just especially if they were working and then we're having now issues. Might be that we need to track stuff down. I must admit I'm not in the NVIDIA camp anymore, so with regards to beta drivers for AMD cards and future tech, lots of info, lots of advice, how to configure them, sure, but on the NVIDIA side of things, other than confirming that you can in the game INI files edit your VRAM pool to a larger space, you might be able to sort your streaming issues out by doing that. But please, gamers, don't delete that folder, no ID, no Windows or something, out of the game directory. You'll get double the frame rate, sure, but your in-game shaders will build up in the background very, very slowly, and so you can be in a room for 5 minutes looking at the floor, and then one of the reflections will kick in, and then about 30 seconds or a minute later another one might kick in, and it just makes it really obvious as you watch the game world build in slowly and your shadows eventually come back in. But yeah, your doubled frame rate is because you basically turned all your ray tracing off. If you want double frame rate, just turn your ray tracing off. You don't have to, break your game in order to do it, and then feel really proud of yourself having done something at a technical level in the back end. Look, in terms of editing the game INI files, if you do make them read-only after setting full screen, so full screen will be set to, I think it's set to 1. I normally read a 1 as a binary value of 1 or 0, 1 being on and 0 being off, or vice versa. The settings in Hogwarts felt a little bit back to front for me, and I just noticed I did see a full screen option in there. I think it was set equals 1, which for me would have gone like, oh yeah, full screen's on. But nope, I changed that to a 0, and I made the file read-only so that the game can't, each time it exits the game, change those settings. And it's been full screen, I think, every time I've booted it for the last 3 or 4 boots. And anyone that knows much about PC software knows that full screen mode is generally what you want if you want maximum performance. So at the moment I'm not running in full screen mode just because that overlay is up. So my performance goes up quite noticeably if I drop that overlay. If only because of rendering an overlay, but even more so when I'm not running in full screen mode. Ah, look, I've never seen frames that bad. So, look, I've clearly got some issues here to sort through. This is a test that I need to look at. GPU power at 116 watts and then it turned back up. So I'm going to guess my driver's crashed hours ago. I've been running the game in less than ideal ways, and I didn't care. I like the game running for this long. If you're watching this video and you don't have the joy of being able to make your game run for any amount of time, I'm sorry if I'm making it all so, it seems so lighthearted and so easy. I definitely don't feel that way as a tech. I spent a bit of time servicing this game, trying to make the errors that other people see, and then seeing ways to combat the difficulties and make them work. And it can be done. Certainly can be done. And it's, yeah, the biggest ones at the moment, sort out your streaming systems, look where your page file is, maybe put it on a fast drive if need be. Consider where your game is at. If it's an SSD that uses a lot of CPU and your CPU is borderline minimal to meet the needs of this game, and don't just say, oh no, but my CPU is only 30% used. No. If you've only got the bare minimal 6-core 12 threads or 4-core 8 threads bare minimal, anything less than that, you really are pulling down your minimum frame rates, and so your experiences in the game could be very different to other people's for legitimate reasons, not just that your video card might need a new driver or something. Anyway, I don't wish to make the world's longest video. That's for other days. Today it's about illumination, shall we? Oh look, this character uses different buttons. Lumos, there we go. Alright, so yeah, look, I can only hope that your game works more smoothly than the game session we've just seen here. Look, it is a game that with the right tweakings, I flew around the map for hours with no microstutter, no slowdown, no anything. I just, it can be done, and that's the last couple of days. It can be done, and it can be done every single gaming session once your rig is sorted out. And at this point in time, I believe it's streaming systems. If the game doesn't make heavy use of your VRAM, or even arguably your GPU RAM at the moment, we can see it dumping it so badly. It is putting a lot of effort on that page file. And they do use a page file because it just ensures a lowest common denominator that all PC experience should just work at a certain level, and the developers can rely on PC as a platform being a lot more consistent and stable. So I can only hope this is your experience and that you can get there, and I'll see you in the next one. Well wishes.